When you are putting together your SketchUp model, it is good to have kind of tidy habits for your modeling. One thing to do to kind of make your modeling go a little faster, a little cleaner, as mentioned earlier when I talked about styles, using a style that has the little clock next to it. That little clock indicates a fast style, and that will help you to make your model zip along a little better. You can also turn off textures. Those tend to be a big time drag on your system. But another thing you can do, you can zoom way out, and I have this exterior overview. But sometimes you'll have objects that are way off in outer space somewhere. For example, I may have a component that somehow escaped me. So hitting the Zoom Extents button will zoom you all the way out so that you can see any objects that are kind of almost invisible from your main view. Here I've got a little random square that I must have drawn accidentally. I can just delete it. Now when I click Zoom Extents, it should zoom me to everything it finds, and now it doesn't find any random stuff. So you'll want to delete all those extra objects if possible. Let me go back to my interior here. Another thing you can do is to purge your model. And what you can do to do that is go to the Window pull-down menu and choose Model Info. And there are a number of panels on this dialog, but the big one that we're concerned with, first of all, the file, if you look at that one, it will tell you the size of your model. Now, right now, this is about 55 megabytes, which is a pretty big file. But some of you, I have seen, can produce models well in excess of 100 megabytes, and that can get a little taxing on your system, or even a fancier system. So if you go to the statistics panel of this model, you can do what's called purging, which basically removes, as it says here, all unused components, yada, yada, yada. I'll just click on that. You can also click on the Fix Problems button, and usually SketchUp will warn you if there was a problem when you open the file. But right now, it just says no problem. Now, when I save the drawing, I can recheck the File tab and see if I saved any space, and in fact I did. You can see I saved about 5 or 6 megabytes, which is about 10% of the model size. That will help me out. Let's talk a little bit about some of the specialized tools that SketchUp has. There are a few that come with SketchUp, kind of out of the box, and one that I particularly like is called Sandbox tools. And we can call these up by going to the View pull-down menu, Tool Palettes, and Sandbox. There's a little tool palette that comes up. PC users can right-click on a blank area of this toolbars, and they'll see a long list of tool palettes that are available. They can call up Sandbox that way. And the way this works, there's basically a couple of tools. You can draw a grid that can be manipulated using some simple tools. Now, Sandbox actually is really great if you ever have to draw terrain. But for us, we just like to draw, pillows and that sort of thing. So I'm going to click the Draw a Grid tool. And you can specify down here on the lower right the grid spacing. And I might make it 6 inches. Hit Enter. And now when I start my grid, you'll see kind of an iconic representation of the spacing of the grid. I'll just draw it out like that. To make manipulations to this grid, you have to use the Modified tool, double-click on it, and now you're editing it. It's basically a group. And there's a special tool called Smooth, which has an up and down arrow over the grid. Click on that. You can specify a radius. I think 30 feet is the default. I'm going to use 2 feet. You'll see that number show up down here. But now your cursor will become a circle, and you can click and drag on different parts of this grid. And you can drag them up or down. You can drag corners. You can make this into something really interesting. You can even drag that up. You can smooth parts that you have smoothed before. You can also, if you select this group, you can rotate it. I'll just use my move tool to rotate it around. And now, double click on it again, click on my smooth tool, and I can pull it, and it always goes up and down. So you'll have to take that into consideration, but you can get some really interesting effects. And of course, for now, this is going to be some kind of bizarre wall sculpture. Anyway, once you've created your interesting object here, you can select it. I'll just triple click on it. And you can smooth it out. Not smooth, but smooth. And this is done using the Soften/Smooth Edges tool. And some people just leave this up if they're doing a lot of smoothing around. Anyway, you can check the Softened Coplanar, and you can drag this up. And now you have an object that can be pretty interesting, especially nice if you're trying to do some landscaping or just have some kind of organic sculpture-shaped object in your project. You might say, are there any other fun tools that are native to SketchUp? Well, one that I particularly like are called solids tools. And if you have a bunch of solid objects, and I've made little boxes out of groups, you can take them and modify them by kind of subtracting them from each other. You can see here, because they're groups, they don't divide each other up like you might want. If I wanted to, for example, turn this into one single object, I can select these objects, and then under the Tools menu, under Solid Tools, there are a couple of options here. I can split them, intersect them, trim them, subtract, or union. You can experiment with each of these. They do kind of what you think they'll do. Union will join them all together. Subtract will subtract one from another. Trim will cut away one from the other. And intersect will give you an object that's only the intersection of two of these. And split, I don't even know what split does. Let's just do union. And now what you'll see is that they've all become one big happy object. There should be, if I delete one of these surfaces, there should be hollows where they intersected before. How is this useful? Well, for one, if you have complicated objects, you can simplify them significantly. Also, this gives you something like a modular piece of furniture, for example, very quickly by just drawing simple shapes. One thing you can do, by the way, is you can have these toolbars readily available. For example, I called up this Sandbox toolbar. I can just close it, and when I'm done with it, I can also close this one. You can also add toolbars to your toolbar area. Now, on a Mac, it's a little different. On a PC, when you go to the Tool Palettes menu, you have a long list of toolbars, including the Solids tools that we just demonstrated here. On a Mac, sadly, you don't have that. I don't know why they don't have it divided into toolbars. They should. For Mac users, they will have to go on the toolbar, right-click on it, and choose Customize Toolbar. And you'll end up with a menu of basically every tool that's in SketchUp, including the ones we were just using, the outer shell tool. And you can drag those right up onto your toolbar if you want. You can also drag things off of your toolbar if you feel like you're not going to use them. Now, what if you want even more options for tools to add? Well, as I mentioned, SketchUp is kind of like a simple smartphone in that it has very basic tools, but you can add to them using what are called extensions. And this is sort of like apps that you would see in the App Store. In fact, there's even an Extension Warehouse. I'll show you that right up here on the toolbar. It looks suspiciously like a box of clam strips that you can get here in New England. Anyway, when you open that up, there is a whole warehouse, a whole essentially app store of fun toys that you can add to your SketchUp interface. Now, many of these are ones that really aren't useful for us, but one that I happen to like, it actually shows up here in this list as the default list. It's called 1001 Bit Tools. It's a little old, but it's also free, and we like free. And you can also search for 1001 Bit Tools if yours doesn't show up on the top of the list. And to install one of these apps, it's very similar to an app store. You just click Install, And what will happen, you will have to log in to the Extension Warehouse, which I've already done using my username. It will also warn you if the extension hasn't been updated recently, and it's not as recent as your version of SketchUp. I'm going to install it anyway. It will also ask you questions about do you want to allow it permissions, that sort of thing. Of course I do, or else I wouldn't have clicked on it in the first place. And now it should be part of my project. Each extension that you can add, and there are a lot of different ones, will do different things. Some of them will not have a toolbar. Some of them will. This one actually can have one big toolbar, several smaller toolbars, or I can just add individual tools to my standard default Mac toolbar. Anyway, there are so many tools here, I'm not going to show you them all. However, I will show you the most fun ones. The one that I think is the most useful for us as designers is the wall tool. You just click on the tool. Usually with most of these tools, a menu pops up asking you, what do you want to do with this wall? What are the dimensions? You can change them to be whatever you want. You can also add profiles and things like that to the wall, and you can control how it's drawn. But basically, if you click Build Wall, now I can start to draw walls around my project. And what's cool about that, they come in as a group that can be edited. You can also use one of the other tools. It's right next to Wall. It's called the Opening tool, and you can make an opening of whatever width you want, 3 feet by 5 feet. And you can create this opening, and the way you show where the opening goes, you have to kind of click to define a horizontal location and then click several times to enter it. And it cuts a hole right through your wall. This is a really quick way to generate kind of a three-dimensional project from really not much at all. What other tools are available here in the 1001-bit tools? Well, there really aren't 1001, but there are a few other quickie tools that I happen to like. There's a couple of stair tools. If I click on the Build Staircase tool, and this is the kind of out and back staircase tool, you can define a number of different aspects of this, including the riser height, how many risers you want, or you can tell it to calculate the distance between floors, and of course this staircase direction. I'll just click Build Staircase. It wants to know what direction you want the staircase to go in, and then click to place it. Obviously that saves you a lot of time. It may not be the kind of staircase you like, but it is certainly a lot less time consuming than trying to build it on your own. One tool that might be helpful in our little project is the window frame tool, or it's actually panel tool. And I can turn my little glass box into something that actually has frames to it. Let me hide the exterior building, which I put on a layer, and then I'll call up this frame tool. It's over here, and it looks like, well, like a window frame. Just click on that, and it gives you a number of different options for creating panels. Maybe I'll just have 2 rows, but 10 columns. Let's see if that looks good. And there's a number of different profiles you can use. You can have a rectangular frame with a recessed and extruded edge. This is as opposed to just a rectangular frame that's a little more simple, or one with a beveled edge. Not a lot of options, but there are some. And you can actually control these things more minutely. But then just click Create Window Frame. It will ask you to select a face to divide. I'll just click on this face, and you can see it's divided it up. Now, if that's not quite the spacing that I want to have, just hit Undo, Command Z, go back to the window frame tool, or panel divider, I guess, and change the number of spaces. You can't change it afterwards. It's just one of those things. This will create a panel that's actually a group. You can select it, move it around. You can even double click on it and paint it some material. And it's set up very nicely, as you can see. Now, if you're going to put a panel on the front of this space, You can use the same tool, but you can't use the same number of panels because, of course, if this was divided into 10, they'd be too small. I believe I have 6 spaces between my columns in the front, so I'm going to go with that one. If I keep the same number of rows, then it should divide up this face with the same spacing. And there we go. So you can pretty quickly create a box for your project that looks suspiciously like a curtain wall frame. And I'll do the other 2 sides at my leisure. So, still not finding enough tools to add to your SketchUp interface? Well, besides the Extension Warehouse, there's a whole website out there devoted to SketchUp. It's called Sketchucation. And in fact, there are a lot of resources here, including tutorials at different levels. It's really a great site. Many of the plugins, in fact, probably most, are free. One that I happen to like that I think is useful for our purposes is called FredoCorner. And you can watch the little video. It shows you how it works. This is great for things like couches, cushions, and other sort of softer interior objects. And extensions that come from Sketchucation are a little more complicated to install. First of all, you have to log in. Then you have to download the app. So back in SketchUp, to install that extension that you went to go and get, go to the Window pull-down menu, and there is an Extension Manager. And what this will do, this will show you any extensions that are already in your project. Let me just move this out of the way. And I have Sandbox on, and it is enabled. There are a couple of other random ones. You can install a new one. There's a button down at the bottom. So you click on that button. You'll want to browse for the tool that you downloaded. In this case, it is a Fredo tool called FredoCorner. This one also uses a library of features that makes it work, so you can download that as well. But anyway, just click Open, and it will install into your system. And then you can close the Extension Manager. Now, mine has installed a little toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar, you'll have to call it up using the View Toolbars menu. Anyway, select the objects that you want to modify, and then the tools are generally pretty straightforward. You just kind of look at them. It gives you a number of parameters. Let me just drag this down, many of which you can change just by clicking in there and changing their values. For example, 4 inches might be better for that rounding parameters, and you'll see what it looks like here in a kind of preview. You can preview it by clicking the Toggle Preview tab. If you don't like what you're seeing, you can again change these features. And then when you like it, just click Generate Geometry or hit Enter. And now you have a smoothed object. What's nice about this is these objects are simple SketchUp objects. I simplified these series of boxes, if you remember, and now it will smooth them appropriately based on the joints. And there are so many different options here. I'm not going to get into each one, but this is a really fun tool, and it's a great way to generate soft objects. One last tool that I really like is called Clothworks. And this is a terrific tool for doing sort of more organic-y shapes that want to fit around other shapes. So for example, I'm going to try and draw a tablecloth on this little round table. I'll just draw a rectangle on top of it. Maybe I'll make it 4 feet by 4 feet by just typing in 4 feet, 4 feet. I'll select the new rectangle, make it a group, and now I can move it into position on top of the table. You want it to be up above the table just a little bit, so make sure you move it up. And I'll just move it up 6 inches or so. But what you can do using Clothworks, once I've installed it, and I got it from the Sketchucation website, you can just right-click on some object that you want the cloth to bend over and choose Make Collider under the Clothworks submenu. You can also right-click on the object itself and choose Make Cloth. And that tells the Clothwork app that, oh, this is what you want to fiddle around with. This is what you want to make a piece of cloth. Now, you can also define how soft, I guess, the cloth is. Now, the free version doesn't have quite all the options that this one does. I've sadly had to pay for this one. But you can apply a simple grid to even the free version. It gives you a default value, which I'm just going to go with here. Then it's just a matter of hitting play here on the Clothworks menu. There are a couple of other buttons which are a little more complicated. I'm not going to go into every option on this tool, but needless to say, it can do quite a lot. When I hit play, you'll see that the cloth starts to go down over the table. You can even drag pieces of it if you want kind of a ruffly look to it. And then when it looks the way you want, you just hit stop. And there you go. You have a lovely tablecloth that you can even paint some solid color, and it looks very nice. If you do want it to show up in all of your tables, you'll have to copy and paste it into the inside of the component, and that way it'll be on all of them. But Clothworks is a really fun one, especially if you're doing something like curtains and you want it to have a sort of softer, less computer-generated feel. This is a nice way to do that. So I would strongly recommend exploring the Extension Warehouse and seeing if you can find some tools that you're going to find useful. For us, we already have, for example, a rendering tool that we're going to use called Enscape. We don't need to get it here, but maybe you do other things. We can go to the interior design industry, or if you find that you're making a lot of furniture or other things in your projects, by all means, go and find some tools. There are a lot of ways to speed up your workflow with really simple but powerful tools. Stairs are a really fun part of any project, really an opportunity for a dramatic statement. However, typical of a lot of architectural features, they are also somewhat limited by building codes. So in our existing conditions of this double-story project, we need stairs, but we also need them to be code compliant. And usually where I start is by drawing a code compliant tread, just the plan of one. At least in Massachusetts, the minimum you're going to need is 44 inches. I usually make them 48 just because 44 is a little narrow. And then the minimum tread width is 11 inches for a non-residential stair. Now, of course, whatever state you're in, you're going to want to make sure that you comply with those dimensions. Now, the minimum height is 7 inches. So, I'm sorry, the maximum height. I always get the minimum and maximum mixed up, and you know, that's an important distinction. So, anyway, so this box here represents kind of the single code compliant tread. Now, it doesn't have a nosing or anything in there, which is, of course, part of the stair construction, but it is a maximum of 7 inches high, a minimum of 11 inches deep, and 44 or 48 inches wide, which is a comfortable and code compliant egress stair width. So what I like to do, I make a component out of this, and I'll just call it single whatever tread riser combo. What's nice about this is that now if I use this as a basis for my rise and run, I can be pretty sure that I'm gonna get close to code compliant. And the way you do this is I don't actually know how many risers that I'm going to need or treads, and I'm probably going to have a stair that goes up to a landing and back. But let's just see how many treads and risers we need just to get us up to the second floor. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit, and I'm going to use my move copy command and tap the Alt key so that I'm making a copy. And what I'm doing, I'm grabbing this by the endpoint, and making a copy to the next kind of the lower left end point and dragging it up to the upper right of the side of the stair, so that I go up exactly 8 inches and over exactly 11. Now, I don't know how many I need, but I'm just going to experiment and times 16. Oh, it doesn't quite make it. Times 17. Still doesn't quite make it. Times 18. See how I'm just kind of trying to get as close as I can get. Times 19. And 19 seems to be just about right. Okay. Now, and I believe in the book I did this calculation so that it would actually work out to exactly 19, which is very handy. So now I've got my stair and riser and run combination here. And the easiest thing to do, let me just select this whole element here. And what I'll do, I'll turn the whole stair into basically a group. And this will give me a little bit easier time editing it. In fact, I probably should have done that from the start. So I'm going to make a group. Okay. And one nice thing about this, if you have done like I have done, and it doesn't land exactly right, you can use the scale tool to scale the stair. The only trick is make sure to scale it only down. Never scale it up, because then you'll lose your code compliance. If I scale it down, my riser height will be slightly less than 7 inches. Remember, 7 is the maximum. I can also use the scale command left to right, but again, you don't want to decrease it beyond the 11-inch minimum tread depth. So you can make it a longer stair by all means, but don't make it shorter, because then you'll ruin the code compliance. So anyway, there you go. We have our stair. Now let's start with kind of some of the design features. I'm going to double click on this. Double click on the stair using the edit command. And what I like to do is during component editing, I like to hide the rest of the model. Okay, I've gotten this to be code compliant. It does reach to the second floor, but now I don't really want the rest of the model there to kind of confuse me. Now, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top 9 risers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'm going to make those the kind of return heading back in the opposite direction. I'll just use the rotate command, rotate these around. Fortunately, SketchUp will snap to that distance. Now, what I think I'll do, I'll make this top riser a landing. And all I have to do to make it a landing is make this a unique component. I'll just right-click on it and choose Make Unique. Now, when I edit it, it will not change any of the others. And I can double-click on it, push-pull it out. We need it to be at least the width of the stair, which is 48. So if I move it out 3 foot 1, that should give me the correct width. And I'll make it an extra 4 feet wide. Now, of course, there's all sorts of other stuff that goes into a landing. I don't have any of the stringer construction, but at this point, I'm just trying to get a sense of the design. I don't really need to fuss too much over the subtleties. I mean, I suppose you should, but it's a give and take between the details and the overall concept. So there we go. I have an out and back stair, and I could click outside of this to see where it lands in the project. Okay, whoops. Let's go back to this view. And I could move the whole stair over so that it lands properly here. And of course, I don't actually need the top landing, the top tread, because the second floor will form the landing. Okay, and I should probably move this over so it actually lands in the opening and not misses it. So there we go. I've got the basics of my stair. Now, what if I want to experiment? Because this really isn't a buildable sort of stair right now. Let me just hide the rest of the model once again. And I usually give a keyboard shortcut to that, by the way. First of all, I want to fill in the bottom of this. Because of the way I created it, it actually accidentally ended up being hollow. Now, let's say I don't want it to be this unitary stair, which really isn't buildable. Maybe I want it to be a smooth bottom. I can just grab one of the components, and you see how it smooths out the whole bottom? And I can even use the erase key and hide these lines so that I get a smoother look to it. See how nice that looks? Okay. Now I can even come in and let's say I want to add a nosing to this. I can, let's say, make a copy of this. And again, you will want to make absolutely sure that you check your local stair codes to make sure that you are compliant with whatever their requirements are. And there are all sorts of requirements. That is the sort of bane of our life as designers, is always coming up with things that are compliant with the building codes. So you see how pretty quickly I can generate a stair that's, you know, fairly handsome. Again, you can come in, add subtleties. This is a design problem, not a you know, kind of just a construction, make it work kind of problem. Do we really like the way this looks? You can experiment with colors, materials. And of course, I don't have the nosing here at the landing and a number of other features. But this really gives you a very quick sense of what the stair can look like and just a kind of proof of concept. Now, what if you don't feel like creating it from scratch, but you just want a ready-made one? Well, there are a number of ways that you can do that. There are all sorts of plugins for this sort of thing. One of my favorites is one called 1001 Bit Tools. And it's right here, 1001 Bit Tools. Don't know quite what the meaning of the name is, but it has all sorts of different tools that are meant for different architectural circumstances. Things like swept blends that you see, chamfer, things that are AutoCAD or Revit. You can also have a two-directional array, which you can do in using the move copy command, but this has a few more tools. You can type in numbers and that sort of thing. But the thing that we're most interested in is the stair tool. And if you look here, there are a number of different stair options. If I just choose the one that looks fairly similar to what we were doing, what's nice about this is it does come with stringers, first of all, and then second of all, it allows you to type in different values. Now, I could absolutely come in here and you know, type in different numbers to try and make it match as much as possible. I don't know why it's 13/16 of an inch. You know, and all that. That there's some kind of mysterious dimensions that I'm not exactly sure where they come from. But anyway, you can type in numbers here. I think we decided there were 9 risers in the second flight, and you can change the stringer depth and the offset of the handrail. Anyway, when you click Build Staircase, all you have to do is click once to plant it. You see how it gives you the outline of the stair. Let's see if we can get it to be more or less in the same direction as our other object. And that's pretty close. You know, obviously there would be some design considerations. What is this made of? It looks pretty much like steel. Do we want it to be steel? Et cetera, et cetera. But it's actually a pretty, you know, elaborate stair just for something that really we created in a very short time. And you'll see here that there are other stairs, including a circular stair, which is, of course, loads of fun, but not nearly as valuable in a non-residential setting where basically So what if I want to put a handrail on these guides that were created here? It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but what you'll see is it is absolutely possible because the 1001 Bit Tools has left these lines in the exact location where the handrails should go. And as you drill down, you'll find that these are individual lines. The trick is going to be getting the circle, that's the profile of the handrail, in the right location. You really, I'm trying to draw one right now on the end, but I want it to flip up, and I just can't do it. So the trick here, draw a rectangle
that will give us a reference point that we can then use to draw the circle. I'll come over here and draw my circle. And of course, whoops, draw my circle at the correct radius, which is 0.75 inches, or give you an overall diameter of 1.5 inches. And then I want to get rid of the kind of extra pieces. Now, when you have objects this small, zooming in and out can be a real hassle. So I often will try to select the object I want to zoom in on, and that allows me to make it easier. See how when I zoom in and out and I don't have it selected, it kind of goes around my cursor, but even if I'm fairly close to the object, it can be still quite unpredictable. So anyway, once you've gotten the handrail outlined the way you want it, then it's a matter of using the Follow Me tool, select the surface, and then hopefully you can get it to follow along. I'll just use the pan tool in the middle of my command here. Get it to follow along the path. Usually this path is pretty continuous, and so you can get it to work quite nicely. And you see here, I'll just click out of it, I have a nice little handrail. Now I don't have the attachments to the wall. If the handrail were to stop at the landing, depending on if your codes allow that or not, typically the handrail should be continuous all the way down, but the internal handrail, and obviously I don't have any balusters for the interior section, so there are quite a few things that are not working yet, but you can see that as a proof of concept, this is a really quick way to get a code-compliant, fairly interesting stair built quite efficiently. So there are so many different plugins for SketchUp extensions that allow you to draw interesting and unusual shapes. There's no way that I can cover them all, and of course I'd like to show you a few just to give you a sense of what the functionality might be that you can add. First of all, the Extension Warehouse here is available up on the default toolbar, and that's where you collect kind of all of these different kinds of extensions, and you can search and you can base it on your industry. So interior design, it'll show you like the most popular ones out there, and then you can add them in, and you generally need to sign into your Google account. Or create your own custom one. And that's actually a relic of when SketchUp was owned by Google. They aren't anymore. They're owned by Trimble. Anyway, one of my favorites, I tend to go for the ones which are free, of which there are really so many. First of all, 1001-bit tools is this really long toolbar here. In fact, I usually hide the toolbar and just grab the tools out of the menu here. But when you go and install this extension, there's quite a few. I've already demonstrated one which allows you to create stairs. One that's handy here, I'll show you. It allows the creation of walls. Just click on the Walls tool, and you can tell it how long you want it or how high you want it, and the thickness of the wall. Maybe it's a block wall. And when you click Build Wall, what it does is you can essentially draw like you might see in a lot of BIM programs. You can create basically it's a group that you can come in and edit, and the pieces are available for editing if the geometry allows it. Anyway, the thing that's really cool about these walls is it also has a make a hole in a wall tool here, and it looks kind of like a little window opening. And when you use SketchUp components, normally they cut through one surface but not two. So this make a hole in a wall tool is super handy because it cuts through both surfaces. It poses certain problems if the component doesn't have anything to go into. But anyway, we can make a 4 foot by 3 foot or 6 foot opening. Okay, I think this was a tall wall. Click Create Opening, and what it does is it asks for kind of a reference point, usually off of a corner. So you indicate the corner, the how far along the wall, and then some height. So you could absolutely have reference planes that you could use for that. Anyway, and then these are it's part of the geometry, so you can modify it as needed if you decide you want to change it. So that's a really handy tool, and this is a group, as I said before, so you can modify it in any number of ways. Anyway, there's so many others in here, ways to create grills and louvers and framing, super interesting and valuable. So that's 1001-bit tools available at the Extension Warehouse. Another one that I happen to like is this one called Skin, or Bubble, I think it's called. And what this allows you to do is draw some irregular shape and create a surface. So let's say you wanted to make, I don't know, an unusual roof pattern. You could draw these shapes, click the Skin tool. It warns you that it is time limited, although interesting enough, they always kind of allow you to change it. And down here at the bottom, it asks you how many divisions, how many kind of grids do you want. I'll make 20. And hit enter, and what it will do is it will try to take that grid and shape it around this whatever geometry you created. So it can create some interesting shapes, but then you can actually take that and you can do interesting things like inflate it by applying pressure to it. Sometimes this doesn't work, and sometimes your computer crashes when you do it, but anyway, you can make it positive or negative pressure, and you can actually kind of like blow this thing up to the point that it wraps over on itself. So anyway, a fun thing, and then this is an object that you can move and paint and do other things too. And what you'll see is that the original outline is here. So if you wanted to create a bunch and kind of experiment, that's a great way to do it. There is another tool which does something very similar. It's called Curvy Loft. Now this is available on a website called Sketchucation, and the link is in the web links document. And this is also a very handy tool, and it's part of a package of tools by a writer named Fredo. Fredo, and he has created all these really terrific tools. Anyway, it also has a skinning tool here. That's the tool right here. And you can create an unusual object, create the skin tool, and there are usually these options here. You can toggle on and off, you can change values, and it will do all sorts of different things depending on what you do, and the geometry that you've got. So anyway, the more that you simplify and sample, the more detailed you get. So again, these are really nice ways to create simple shapes. And you might say, hey, this one's so smooth. It's because the hidden geometry is visible. And you can do the same with this. If you right-click on this one, you can soften and smooth it. I usually drag that all away. And now all the hidden geometry that I got by softening and smoothing, if I just hide the hidden geometry, I get kind of a helmet or a coconut shell, or I'm not sure what you'd want to call it. So anyway, that's a great tool, Curvy Loft. And the libfredo tools are actually really, there's so many valuable ones in there. So anyway, another one that I like, I'm just going to close these, is the tool, let's see, this one I believe is a libfredo tool, and it allows you to soften the edges of an object. Like one of the harder things to model is something like cushions. If you click the Soften Edges tool, there's, again, like a lot of these Fredo tools, it has a number of options as to how it creates the geometry. In this case, it softens based on a number of radii and other settings, which you can adjust. But you can see that's quite a nice little couch, and very quickly shaped. Again, it's not fully organic geometry, but it is certainly very interesting. So that's another tool. And then let's see, this one here allows you to draw what are called Bezier curves. And if you're familiar with Adobe Illustrator or something like that, Bezier curves are these. Bezier curves are these irregular curves that use a particular type of geometry, mathematical kind of calculation. These Bezier points allow you to kind of modify the parabolas, I believe. Anyway, these are super handy, especially if you want to create, I don't know, just an unusual shape. You can use these, and they do perform like other types of geometry in SketchUp, so you can create, interesting shapes and that sort of thing. Anyway, and they can be smoothed and all that sort of stuff. And as you can see from this toolbar, there are quite a few tools for drawing spirals and clouds and straight lines with arcs in them and stuff like that.